I'm a film historian from New York City. I run the film program at the New School, a university in New York City, and I'm the author of the new book, We'll Always Have Casablanca, the life, legend, and afterlife of Hollywood's most beloved movie. But that's what we're going to see tonight. That's what I'm so eager to see. Because for me, it's my first time in Morocco, and I'm so honored and happy to be here. But this will give me the opportunity as well to see how an audience, when they watch this movie, whether they look at it and say, oh, this is just Hollywood, this is just, or whether they look at the way that lots of American viewers look at it and say, oh, they really captured the flavor, the feel of this great North African city during the war. And that will be interesting for me to see, because I alone cannot make that distinction, given that this is my first time in the country. But what they were doing during the time of the production, so they began in the spring of 1942, it had its premiere on November 26, 1942, almost exactly 75 years ago today. And what they were doing is trying to introduce to American audiences the need to engage in the fight against fascism, the need to engage in the fight against the Nazis. And so part of that was to show what was happening in Casablanca, what was happening with the refugees, what was happening with Vichy, the Vichy collaboration with the Nazi regime, and the need for the Allies to fight against all forms of fascism, but specifically the Nazi regime as well as the Vichy collaborationists. So, and that's, I think, all relatively clear in the film and also relatively accurate, despite the fact that it's all made in Burbank, California at Warner Brothers Studio and is very much a Hollywood movie. Well, that was a very, very difficult process at Warner Brothers in terms of bringing in different actors to test for the roles. Humphrey Bogart was definitely, he from the very beginning, the producer, Hal Wallace, as well as the director, Michael Curtiz, they both knew they wanted to use Humphrey Bogart for the role of Rick Blaine, and the owner of Rick's Cafe. And now you have a Rick's Cafe here in Casablanca. But so they knew that. For the role of Ilse Lund, played by Ingrid Bergman, a 27-year-old Swedish actress, Ingrid Bergman, there were several others who were considered. There's a French actress by the name of Michelle Morgan, who was in Joan of Paris just a couple years earlier, playing opposite of Paul Henry, who plays Victor Laszlo in this movie. And she was brought in and tested for the role. They also considered for a while Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr would have been very expensive. And finally they got to Ingrid Bergman, who, this is her major sort of breakout performance. And even though she was in some other really magnificent films, too, with Alfred Hitchcock, for instance, Notorious and Spellbound, her collaborations with her then husband, Roberto Rossellini, during the age of Italian neorealism, and even one film with Ingmar Bergman, Höstsonata, Autumn Sonata. She's most remembered for this film, despite these other performances. And that was something that even bothered Ingrid Bergman late in life. She used to, all they ever want to talk with me about is what she would say. They only want to talk with me about playing Ilse Lund in Casablanca. But that gives you an idea of the way that these actors in the film became so famous for the roles that they played. It gives you an idea of how 75 years after the premiere, how much the name of the movie means to international audience. So that's their first association, not the North African city, not the Moroccan city, but the movie. And so it would make sense. The other thing that's, I think, really important in the film is the way that it deals with the refugee crisis at the time. And I think there's a very strong affinity with the way that we're dealing today with the refugee crisis, from the Syrian refugees, for instance. And there was a wonderful installation at the National Gallery in Berlin by a South African artist. Her name is Candice Brights, and it's called Love Story. And it's a 7-panel installation, and she has 7 stories by refugees, and they say them all behind it with a green screen behind them. They say their stories, and then Alec Baldwin and Julianne Moore deliver the exact same story, to give you an idea of what happens when you have Hollywood stars tell a story. And the same is true of the film. You have Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, Paul Henry, and others Blood Rains, all telling the story. And audiences pay attention to that, for better or for worse. I mean, this is the power, the tyranny, if you like, of Hollywood. The link between the historical landing in North Africa of the Allied troops under General Patton and the victory within 72 hours here in the actual Casablanca, and the link to the movie is that because of the headlines in the newspapers in the US specifically, Jack Warner, head of Warner Brothers, decided to rush the film into release. So it was to capitalize on the fact that Americans across the nation were thinking about Casablanca. So the link between Operation Torch and the movie, in many respects, is really a publicity link. It's a PR, shameless PR. And that is why the film premiered on Thanksgiving Day, which is a big holiday in America. It'll be next Thursday, but Thanksgiving Day, the 26th of November, 1942. And that's the reason, because of the Operation Torch and because people were thinking about the actual Casablanca. And then in January of 43, of course, the Casablanca Conference, and that's when the film went into general release. So people were still thinking about it. Yeah, it's very, very, exactly. Publicity, it's very smart. It's doing just great. Yeah, thank you. It is the book. What I did, and we have the wonderful Algin Harmetz, who did a great production history 25 years ago called "Round Up the Usual Suspects," which is a line from the movie. And what I try to do that's somewhat different, I build on her and I thank her for her extraordinary work. Without her book, my book could not possibly exist. She interviewed a lot of the actors who were long passed away by the time I began mine. But what I try to do is to take the story of its production and then bring it to now, to the present, and what the movie means for us today, and what it means for us across the globe. This is my first opportunity to see what it means in North Africa. But otherwise, in the book, I talk about, for example, the way that audiences respond to it in France, in Germany, in Austria, in Sweden, and other such places, where also you have some of the actors who are in the production where they originally came from.